All right, I'm giving all the praise to the Most High Yahweh. In the name of his son, Yahweh Shai, peace and blessings to the hopeful elect, and double honors to my elders and my teachers of the great millstone. While you've been running around here for months talking about vote, 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 now you're running around here talking about still the election, still the election. Ain't nobody stealing no damn election. In the meantime, these devils in the background, these high councils, these sorcerers, they're laughing and mocking at you, harvesting all your energy, pushing, building an army of contact tracers, killer robots, thermal imaging drones, and preparing to bring in what they call a great reset. Let's take a look at several simulations that have taken place in the just in the past 5 years alone, leading up to a very simulation that took place in regards to this whole election selection farce that's going on. Let's start with what took place a year ago, Event 201.
Event 201 simulated how the world would respond to a fictional coronavirus pandemic known as CAPS, which swept around the planet. The simulation imagined 65 million people dying, mass lockdowns, quarantines, and censorship of alternative viewpoints under the guise of fighting disinformation, and even floated the idea of arresting people who question the pandemic narrative.
Proverbs 24:2. For their heart study destruction, and their lips talk of mischief. Crimson Contagion, another event that took place in 2019 under the Trump administration. What was it? A respiratory disease that started in China.
From August 13 to August 16, 2019, Trump's Department of Health and Human Services, headed by Alex Azar, partnered with numerous national, state, and local organizations for the exercise. According to the results of the October 2019 draft report, the spread of the novel avian influenza named H7N9 resulted in 110 million infected Americans, 7.7 million hospitalizations, and 586,000 deaths.
These devils are bold. They actually carry out simulations and roleplay videos on plain sight on YouTube. Here is a group called Cognizant. And what does Cognizant do?
Well, hi everybody. I think everybody's on now, so let's get started. Well, it's May the 25th, 2025. I can't believe how time has flown, and I thought it would be a good time today to talk about, what we've been seeing in the last few years since the coronavirus pandemic, since the crisis.
And so initially, after some weeks of fumbling around with Zoom rooms and these sort of goofy online cocktail parties, work streams absolutely emerged that were cheaper and faster and of higher quality.
We are seeing this big shift towards every home being retrofitted with dedicated home office spaces equipped with soundproofing, separate voice-driven entrances, podcast booths, 3D printers, and ergonomic everything.
And people aren't just using these spaces for remote work. They double up as the new social hangout, the new pub, bar, club. They're a place where we can all meet to connect in virtual reality.
And in 2018, once again, in plain sight on YouTube, this took place. Clade X.
Another simulation known as Clade X took place on May 2018. This event examined the response to a pandemic resulting from the release of a fictional virus known as Clade X. In the simulation, the virus was released by a terror group called A Brighter Dawn. As the outbreak spread through the United States, the participants asked what would be needed if the president issued a federal quarantine, noting that the authorities would need to, quote, determine the level of force authorized to maintain quarantine.
Another simulation. The goal of Clade X? To measure the response to a mandatory lockdown and assess what level of force should be used against people who resist. And just as you know, according to the scriptures, once that hedge of protection is taken away, the Most High will unleash his sword of destruction, and Esau will no longer be Mr. Nice Guy. And that's 2 Ezra chapter 16, verses 70 to 73. For there shall be in every place and in next cities a great insurrection upon those that fear the Lord. They shall be like madmen, sparing none, but still spoiling and destroying those that fear the Lord. For they shall waste and take away their goods and cast them out of their houses.
Coincidentally, one of the players involved with Event 201 was Dr. Michael Ryan, the head of the World Health Organization's team responsible for the international containment and treatment of COVID-19. Dr. Michael Ryan has called for looking into families to find potentially sick individuals and isolate them from their families.
The reality of law enforcement, military, and so-called health officials entering your home by force, that's no longer a far-fetched conspiracy theory, especially when you got a Netflix show like To the Lake, a show about a mutated virus outbreak, martial law, FEMA camps, and mass graves and executions of the infected men, women, and children. So these devils have taken crafty counsel. At the same time, releasing movies and TV shows depicting a future under a technocratic medical lockdown over a mutation of COVID-19, but in the movie Songbird, it's COVID-23. Then a Netflix series called Biohackers takes place on a college university where the main character comes to study nanotechnology, vaccines, and implantable microchips. And to add insult to injury, one of the show's focus is on a newly created substance called luciferase, the bioluminescent additive that has been mentioned in real life by several doctors and whistleblowers as the injection used together in a series of vaccinations, all under RNA devices of Bill Gates. And these TV shows aren't, if these shows aren't enough to traumatize the average mind of a heathen devoid of the Holy Spirit, try watching Amazon's Utopia. Now listen carefully. Listen carefully. For all those that are running around all twisted up over this selection, wanting to appoint one of these 90-year-old heathens to rule over you, listen closely, because this was one of several articles that came out in the month of August. One of the most notable ones was through the Washington Post, where it even told you there was a secretive group called the TIP that had planned out this entire simulation of a doomsday plan if Trump would be reelected. And here, this is an article from some page I found. The headline, and this is from August 7th, 2020. John Podesta plays Biden in doomsday plan if Trump is reelected. Listen, the bulk of the story by former BuzzFeed reporter Ben Smith says reveals that a group of influential Democrats have been wargaming scenarios. They've been wargaming scenarios and having simulations for months. And now what we're seeing the exact thing play out. The group, of which creepy former Hillary Clinton campaign manager John Podesta is a member, he role plays as Joe Biden, is preparing for outcomes that would end America as it existed and include civil war. And listen to the end result. The end result, right? The threat of secession by the entire West Coast, followed by the possible intervention of the U.S. Armed Forces, which would be a perfect scenario to bring in martial law for good. And this is what we're seeing. If this is the model that they're going by, with all the technology and all the wargaming resources that they have, both sides, because you know both sides are behind this. If this is what's going on right now, you might as well buckle up and get ready. And I'm going to play the video so you can see this for yourself.
This leads us to a number of recent simulations of the 2020 US election, which have resulted in chaos and potential civil war. It would be easy to dismiss these exercises as politically driven fantasy if the people involved had not already publicly advised their candidates not to concede the election under any circumstances. Most recently, media reports indicated the Transition Integrity Project held a number of exercises simulating what might happen in the event that Donald Trump loses the 2020 election but refuses to leave office. The TIP itself is a secretive group made up of never-Trump neocon Republicans and Democrats associated with the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton. The Boston Globe reported that the TIP met in June to simulate the 11-week period between Election Day on November 3rd and Inauguration Day on January 20th, 2021. The exercises state that, quote, Trump and his Republican allies used every apparatus of government, the Postal Service, state lawmakers, the Justice Department, federal agents, and the military to hold on to power, and Democrats took to the courts and the streets to try to stop it. The TIP envisioned one scenario where Trump wins and Biden refuses to concede and instead asks for a recount and makes several demands, including to give statehood to Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico and divide California into 5 states. In the exercises, Joe Biden is played by John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign manager and the chief of staff to former President Bill Clinton. The simulations essentially end in a constitutional crisis where there is no clear president and the Supreme Court, or possibly the military, play a deciding role. This unprecedented event could be disastrous for American life, as it is very likely that activists from both sides of the vote would take to the streets to protest what they believe is a theft by their opponents. And if you think protests and fights between extreme leftists and extreme right-wingers are contentious now, just wait until they both feel shafted during the presidential election. Those opposed to Trump will claim Biden won and Trump is attempting to steal the election and create a fascist dictatorship. The Trump supporters will say the satanic radical leftist Democrats are attempting a coup to establish a communist police state. The results will be neighbor turning against neighbor, family members disowning one another, and some political activists may escalate their tactics from protest to violence. Other groups were similarly engaged in war games that predicted complete chaos in the United States on Election Day, as well as the imposition of martial law. This includes the Operation Blackout simulations conducted by the U.S.-Israeli company Cyber Reason. The company has considerable ties to the U.S. and Israeli intelligence community. Operation Blackout involved hackers taking control of city buses around the U.S., crashing into voters waiting in line at polling stations, hacked traffic lights causing accidents, and the release of deep fakes to manipulate the public. The simulation resulted in the cancellation of the 2020 election and the imposition of martial law. While Donald Trump continues to stoke the flames of division and uncertainty surrounding election 2020, the establishment is also preparing for the possibility of martial law in response to this chaos. Meanwhile, the public is being prepared for a second wave of COVID-19 infections, which could lead to the foreshadowed darkest winter. While I don't care to install fear, I do encourage everyone to heed these warnings and be prepared for potential unrest in the days and weeks following the election. Are you prepared?
And there's no prospect. A dark winter. A dark winter.
America's dead.
And he has no clear plan and there's no prospect.
Dead. Dead. America's dead.
Dark winter. A dark winter. And he has no clear plan and there's no prospect.